My name is Andrew Clavin, and this is my new story, Another Kingdom, performed by Michael Knowles. Last time, Austin learned that Lady Betharay was tricked into testifying against him at his trial by Lord Iron's lies and the Wizard Curtain's sorcery. When he snuck in to see the lady, she flung herself into his arms and proclaimed her love for him, part of an affair he couldn't remember. Caught by Sir Aravist, Austin tried to run for his life, but was carried back to Los Angeles. There, after consulting with his friends at Hitchcock's, he continued his search for the mysterious book called Another Kingdom. And now, Another Kingdom, Episode 10.
I expected to leave Hitchcock's and be flung back into the sword fight with Aravist. But no. I went out through the door and was still here, in real life, or in Los Angeles anyway, racing through the fine, warmish autumn day toward the restaurant parking lot. What's more, I came around the corner and saw that the black Mustang was gone. Sarah was gone. I had no clue what that meant, but I was glad to be rid of him, if only for the moment. I hurried to my Nissan and pulled the door open. This time, I did brace myself for the transition, trying to remember some of the sword-fighting moves I'd gleaned from the videos. Again, though, there was no transition. I was in the car. I peeled out and headed for the Getty. I raced along the cliffs of Mulholland with the valley spread out far below me, hazy and serene in the morning sun. I wanted to use the drive time to calm my mind and think. I couldn't. I wanted to try to figure out some strategy to evade Sarah, and the police, and Sir Aravist, but nothing came to me. By the time my car was sputtering up the rising road to the museum complex, I had lost hope, even in what I was doing right now. What real chance was there that Ellen Evermore had left a trail for me? I had seized on Jane's idea out of desperation back in Hitchcock's, but now that I was here, it seemed too outlandish to believe. I parked in the museum garage and jogged out to catch the monorail up to the top of the hill. The little white tramcar was uncrowded in the midweek morning. I sat and stared through the window across from me. A recorded announcer droned something over the address system. As the freeway sank beneath me and green hilly wilderness rose on the horizon, I drifted into a hazy fugue state, barely thinking any more at all. The tram wound its way up to the museum. The trees of the surrounding park crowded in close. I was still gazing distantly into the leaves when for a second, really just a split second, I thought I saw Sarah again. I thought I saw the kitten-faced killer standing amidst the purple blossoms of the willowy jacaranda tree. I blinked out of my fugue state, my blood racing, but he was gone. The blossoms drifted over empty space in an autumn breeze. Had he followed me here? Tracked me? Had he withdrawn from Hitchcock's parking lot so I would reveal where I was headed? But there was no sign of him. I must have just imagined it. Still, when the tram reached the top and I stepped out onto the platform, I was wide awake and all vigilance. I headed into the museum complex wide-eyed. Were there dreamy gardens and plashing fountains all around me? Majestic white towers of cleft-cut travertine linked together by bridges of sunlit glass? Were there stately views of the far-off city that made it seem the capital of an antique paradise, rather than the rootless mall and freeway maze it seemed up close? It didn't matter. I saw none of it. My eyes were studying faces, face after face, searching for my assassin. He was nowhere I could see. I kept telling myself I was spooked, fantasizing. He wouldn't kill me here with the tourists all around. He wanted a private place where he could do his dirty work slowly, a place where no one would hear me scream. I explained all this to my paranoia, but it didn't help. By the time I made it to the European galleries, I could barely focus on the pictures there. I was so busy seeking out that weirdly sexless, weirdly sensual kitten face of his. All the same, I found my painting. It was there in a fine hall of sky-blue walls and misted glass. There were only two other visitors wandering here, a middle-aged Japanese couple. The moment I came around the corner, I spotted two framed pictures hung one on top of the other. They were on the far wall, flanked by two statues, one of a nymph and one of a hero. I didn't know their names. The bottom painting, that was the one I wanted, the one in Gunther's snapshot. It gave me a mystic thrill to stand before it, to stand where Ellen Evermore had stood. For a few seconds, I lost myself in the painting. I forgot my fear of Sarah. I stepped out of the traffic jam of troubles and dangers crowding my mind. I found enough focus to really study the picture and to read the description on the plaque to one side. This was Hercules choosing between virtue and pleasure. Virtue was a stern, helmeted woman, pointing upward toward a climbing, narrow path. Pleasure was arrayed at Hercules' feet, beckoning. She was a beauty, her clothing in disarray, revealing tempting swaths of rounded flesh. Hercules leaned on a post and listened to Virtue's lecture with a quizzical expression, as if he were trying to figure out what possible argument there could be for leaving behind the luscious babe below him in order to climb the rocky, straight, and narrow way. I gazed at the painting for long seconds, searching desperately to see some relevant meaning in it, some clue to the whereabouts of another kingdom. But there was nothing. Nothing I could figure out, at least. And I had lost faith in the whole idea anyway. How could Ellen Evermore know I would find Gunther, that he would show me her picture, that I would understand the clue? It was all ridiculous, I thought, a dream of desperation. And then I thought, wait. The woman pointing upward. Maybe. I lifted my eyes to the painting above the painting. I knew at once that I had found the clue that Ellen Evermore had left for me. I didn't understand it. Not then, not yet. It was a painting of a queenly woman in a chair. Wisdom. That's who the plaque said she was. Like Virtue, she had a soldierly helmet on. She held a shield with the emblem of a dove like the Holy Ghost. There were angels around her. Cherubs. Putti, the plaque said, though I'd never heard the word before. One of the cherubs held a mirror to the woman, symbolizing self-knowledge, I guess. One overhead held a snake coiled in a perfect circle, its tail in its mouth. A symbol, the plaque said, of eternity. But what drew me, held me, excited me, was the third cherub sitting at the woman's feet. He held an open book, a radiant book. He was pointing to the words on the page. The words were in script, hard to make out, but the word just beneath his finger was, Kingdom. The kingdom of God cometh not with observation. Neither shall they say, Lo here, or Lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. I held my breath. I leaned in close, trying to read more of the words. This had to be it, didn't it? This had to be what I was looking for. The photograph of Ellen here. The seated queen, like Queen Elinda, maybe. An open book with the word kingdom in it. It couldn't all be coincidence. This had to be the clue that Jane had said there'd be. But what did it mean? What? I went on gazing, so intent I felt that I might almost fall right into the picture. But all at once, I snapped back into myself. My sense of dread returned to me, stronger for my having forgotten it. I turned quickly to survey the gallery, to make sure no one was creeping up on me. No one was. In fact, I was all alone here now. The Japanese couple had left. There was no one else in sight. There wasn't even a museum guard. It felt eerily deserted. I heard footsteps approaching from the far hall. I felt a chill go through me. Sarah? It couldn't be. But it didn't matter. I was too nervous now. I couldn't stay there. I hurried out the nearer door, came into a broad sunlit stairwell, went down a winding flight and found the bridgeway. There were a few people here, walking to the next building. I joined them, looking back over my shoulder as I went. Down another flight of winding stairs to the ground floor, into a broad atrium encased in glass and striped with beams of light. There were exit doors on either side, to the panorama of the city to the east, and out to the fountains in the museum courtyard to the west. I don't know whether it was superstition or phobia or a sixth sense, but I felt danger closing in on me. I chose a way. I hurried through the sunbeams toward the eastern exit. And there he was. Sarah, coming toward me, coming for me, cat's eyes bright, cat's mouth open on a toothy grin, walking with purpose straight my way. He was 3 steps from the door, no more than that. I froze. Should I run? Where would I go? Could I escape him? He took another step, another. He was at the door. Then his smile went out like a light, and the light in his eyes went out as well. He was looking over my shoulder, looking past me. I turned, followed that look. 2 people, a man and a woman, were approaching the atrium from the west, coming toward the door with 3 jets of a fountain springing high into the air behind him. They were walking with just as much purpose as Sarah, and like Sarah, they were walking straight toward me. The man was shortish, white. He seemed to have been assembled out of blocks. His head, torso, arms, and legs were all cuboid. Even his thin mustache was rectangular. The woman was black, a head taller than the man and big around, 250, maybe 300 pounds. She had a smooth, almost featureless face, oval. A wry expression stuck on the corner of her lips, suspicion implanted permanently in her eyes. I knew who they were, what they were, in a flash. Police detectives, looking for me, looking for a suspect in the murder of Sean Gunther. I turned back to the eastern door. Sarah was gone. He'd seen the cops and run for it. That way was open. I rushed to it, threading between two tourists who were in my way. It occurred to me that I was making myself a fugitive, but what could I do? If I talked to the cops, Orozco would have me killed. I pushed out into the daylight, looking back over my shoulder. I saw Sir Aravis charging at me, his sword upraised. Lady Betharay screamed my name. "Austin!" I turned toward her and saw Aravis's two other guards just cresting the stairs down the hallway, their swords drawn. They were driving toward us, one just behind the other. I still had my silver sword in my hand, Elinda's magic sword. I still had my mercurial armor on me, but any small knowledge I had gleaned from those internet videos, well, that had been blown completely out of my head by the whirlwind of troubles I was in and the sudden shock of this latest transition. I turned back to Aravis, already too late. He was right on top of me, bringing his sword down from on high in a killing stroke. His handsome, bearded face was contorted into ugliness by his murderous rage. In fact, it was his murderous rage that saved me. He was so furious, and he had me there so helpless, at his mercy, that he didn't even bother to use his famous sword fight mastery. He simply brought the edge of the blade whipping at my neck as if to swipe my head off. On pure instinct, I dropped down low, went almost to my knee before I stumbled and fell on one hand. Not only did the sword stroke sweep right over me, but Sir Aravis kept coming with the force of his charge and tripped over my legs and fell headlong on the faded carpet. I used the moment to leap to my feet. I swung around to face him. I saw Lady Betharay pinned in terror against the wall beside a slender vase set on a tall pedestal there. She watched helplessly as first one burly guard and then the other came rushing past her to get at me. They were already close, but they weren't prepared for Aravis's fall. Guard 1 nearly stepped on the captain's hand where it lay stretched out on the runner. Trying to dance around it, he lost his balance and came stumbling toward me. I killed him. It was the most shocking moment of my life. More shocking than when I first stepped into Galiana, more shocking than all the mad creatures of this brain tumor fantasy world, more shocking than all the dangers I'd faced both here and in L.A. The way it happened, it was almost an accident. The thick-set guard was falling my way, still coming on fast. I half-lifted my sword in a half-hopeless, half-attempt to defend myself against him. He stumbled into the point belly first, and I guess I pushed and the blade went into him deep. Shocking. Shocking in the ease of it, shocking in its simplicity, shocking in its completeness and existential finality. The look in his eyes just a few inches from mine, the sudden understanding there that every dream and hope of life was over utterly. And then life left him, all in a second. I saw it go. A whole unique experience of the world suddenly made nothing. My mind frizzed like a broken machine, all sparks and fragments, flashing thoughts. I tried to deny the enormity of it. I tried to tell myself he wasn't real. He was just a character in a book, a hallucination in this whole hallucinated kingdom I was in. But I didn't believe it. Couldn't. I'd seen him. I'd seen him die, seen his humanity snuffed out. I'd killed him, and all I really knew just then, knew all through me, knew without words, was that I never wanted to kill anyone ever again. Then the other guard reached me, and I killed him too. It was all happening in a chaos out of time, slow motion and high speed at once. The dead weight of the falling guard pulled my sword down across my body. The corpse slipped off the blade and thudded to the floor. I looked up and my vision was filled by the roaring face, the deadly blade of guard 2 attacking. He'd brought his sword back over his shoulder for a backhand blow. I was out of position, no way to defend myself. I was a second from dying. Then the vase hit him in the head. Lady Betharay had snatched it off its pedestal and hurled it at him in a panic of fear for me. She hadn't had time to put any force behind it. The vase didn't even break when it struck him. It just thumped him behind the ear and dropped to the rug. but the guard thought he was under attack from behind and it confused him. He threw his sword up to defend himself, leaving his front unguarded. I brought my sword up quickly and slashed it blindly across him. To say I cut his throat is not to tell it. I nearly took his head clean off. It tilted back unnaturally as he spun away from me. He spattered the wall with a geyser of blood and dropped to his knees. There was a brief horror show of convulsions. Then he lay still. By now, Sir Eravist was on his feet. The traffic of the battle had kept him off balance. 2 men dead in what, 5 seconds? The hall was a jumble of flying bodies and slashing swords. Eravist had had to roll away before he could stand. Then the second guard charging had shouldered him and he'd staggered against the wall. Even now as he steadied, it took him a second to get his bearings so he could read the situation. He was standing maybe 6 feet away, with the first guard's corpse between us, and the second guard's corpse against the wall. Lady Betharay, wild-eyed, red-faced, her raven hair wild, had been brought forward by the motion of throwing the vase. She was standing a little off to my left, equidistant from the both of us. Both Sir Eravist and I, realized in the same frantic instant that she was the key to the battle. If Eravist grabbed her, he could use her as a shield and I'd be helpless. We both reached for her at once, but she lunged for me and I got her. I grabbed her reaching hand. I pulled her quickly behind me. I let her go and squared off against the captain. We stood face to face in the broad hallway, a corpse on either side of us. Eravist was angry at the death of his men, I could see that. Still, he smiled. He raised his sword for battle. He crooked his free hand at me. "Come on, then," he said. From the very start, there was no question who was going to win this fight. I was going to die here. I knew it, he knew it too. The man was obviously a master with a blade. You could see it in the way he stood, the spring and flexibility in his legs and torso, the way he held the sword as if it had no weight, the alertness and certainty in his eyes. And me? Well, I had my magic sword, I guess, and the liquid armor that seemed to move with me like a second skin. And now that we were man to man, the few techniques I'd learned from the sword fight videos came back to me. Forehand down to the hand, backslash up to the face, came back to my memory at least for what they were worth. Somehow, too, I was steady inside myself, more steady than I would have expected. After all, just a few hours ago, I'd stood paralyzed in my own bathroom, unable to step over the threshold for fear of coming back here, coming back to this. But now that the worst had happened, now that I was here, I don't know. Maybe it was some magic in the sword that strengthened me, or maybe all the terrors I had faced had made me brave, or maybe it was just that Lady Betharay was behind me, and I knew I had to do my best to protect her even if it meant dying. Whatever, the point is, I was not afraid. Not as afraid as I would have thought I'd be anyway. All that said, I knew I didn't stand a chance. He came at me, and if it hadn't been for some magic in my armor, I'd have been dead in the first second, in a single exchange. His sword was everywhere, so fast I couldn't follow it. His blows were a crisscross of blue-white arcs in the air. From the very start, he had me staggering backward, awkwardly turning my blade to defend against his last attack, even as his next attack was coming from a new direction. In the first few moments, he scored 3 strikes, any one of which could easily have killed me. My armor seemed to have some magic quality that made it flow and thicken at the spot where it was needed. Whenever Eravist's sword came at me, the metal rose like living water to turn aside the blade. So his first strike hit me hard on the side, and should have cut into me, but the armor somehow made it glance off harmlessly. His second strike went directly into my left shoulder, but the armor dulled it so a slash that should have taken my arm off only scratched me. His third strike should have been a killing thrust, but I managed to twist a bit, and the armor carried his blade away to the side. I never got to use any of the techniques I'd learned in the videos, not one. He never gave me the chance. The only time I managed to hit him at all was with a clumsy backhand flick after he'd nearly skewered me and was off balance. It took him by surprise. The edge of my blade struck his chest, but there was no power behind it. He leapt back in time, and I only managed to take out a piece of his doublet near his breast. I didn't even nick him. We drew apart and faced each other again. I was already completely out of breath, gasping for air behind my mercurial helmet. Sir Eravist, he was fine, calm, breathing easy, smiling. He had forced me back down the hall, almost to the door of the bedroom again. Lady Betharay must have still been behind me, though I couldn't see her. I had a moment of clarity then at the end. My whole position came to me. Austin Lively, story analyst, Hollywood hanger-on, standing here in armor holding a sword, fighting for my life and the life of a lady in this gothic pile in a fairy tale kingdom. What a crazy fucking way to die, I thought. Then the end came. It was quick and awful. Erebus moved in on me, light on his feet, his sword swirling. He feinted high with the blade, and I lifted my sword to block it. His sword was already gone from the spot. He had drawn it back, and in a flash he thrust it into me. I could feel my armor rush to gather at the spot and deflect the blade, but there was too much power behind the blow. The point of the sword pierced right through the liquid metal. The blade sank into me, deep into my flesh. I could tell right away he'd killed me. Somewhere in the distance, I heard Lady Betharay scream my name again. "Austin!" But I was lost in the shock of an obscene agony, the blade filling my guts, slicing through my guts. I saw Sir Erebust's eyes, bright with victory. I heard Betharay scream my name again. "Austin!" I felt black grief at having failed her, at leaving her here unprotected. But now I was falling helplessly into darkness, and the world was flying away from me. The whole business of life was fading into a distant irrelevance. I fell and fell toward the black pool of emptiness that was opening up beneath me. The last thought that went through my mind was of Jane Janeway, her face, her tender blue-green eyes, the children we had never had a chance to have. Sir Erebus lifted his foot and kicked me off his sword. All the air and all the life went out of me. Every thought was gone from my mind and every feeling gone from my heart. I was simply toppling sideways into, who knows, oblivion or eternity. "Austin!" And still the voice kept calling out my name. It seemed to have been calling for a long time. I tried to answer, "Betharay," but I didn't have the strength. "Austin! Austin, listen to me!" I listened. Slowly it came to me. This wasn't Lady Betharay at all. It was a man's voice, very far away. "Austin! Damn it!" I struggled to open my eyes. It was hard. I used all my strength, but my eyelids only fluttered like wounded butterflies before they settled closed again. "Austin, you have to wake up, okay? You have to listen. We haven't got much time." I drew breath, gathered myself, tried again. My eyelids rose a little, just enough to let in a blur of light. An unfocused figure was at the center of the brightness. I fought to make the shape come clear. It was a face. For a moment I saw it, the familiar features, swept back golden hair, blue eyes, a grand Viking beard moving with the motion of his lips. "Austin!" My eyes shut again, but now I whispered, "Rich?" It was my brother. "Can you hear me?" I felt his hot breath on my face. He was leaning down over me, very close, speaking very softly, but very urgently too. "Do you understand?" I tried to nod. I wasn't sure whether or not I succeeded. The effort exhausted me. I rested a moment, then tried to open my eyes again. When I did, there was no one there. Rich was gone. Had I dreamed him? And where was I? I was too weak to lift my head and look around, but I turned an inch or so to one side, then the other. I saw I was in a hospital room. I saw a TV hanging over me, the monitor dark. I saw a window with Venetian blinds, morning daylight pouring through the slats. My eyes sank shut. "Austin." I opened my eyes and my brother was back again. Some time must have passed. Yes, the light in the room was different, softer, afternoon light coming through the windows indirectly. How had I gotten here? I couldn't remember. I tried to think. I saw Sir Erebust's face, close, twisted in triumph. I felt the obscene intrusion of his sword. I shook my head. That didn't make sense. It must have been a dream. Everything I remembered must have been a dream. Galliana, Orozco, another kingdom. Soon I would remember what had really happened. A car accident or something. I'd been in a coma, hallucinating. I tried to speak. I tried to say, "What happened to me?" "What?" said Rich. I felt the mattress sink as he sat down on the edge of the bed beside me. I tried to speak again. "Never mind now," he said. "Just listen to me, okay? I don't want them to get to you first." I nodded weakly. I drew a deep breath. I felt a little stronger than before, a little clearer. I felt the way you feel when you first break out of a fever, like I had come through a crisis, like the worst had passed. I lay still, gazing up at the white ceiling, trying to assess my condition. I could tell I was on drugs, pain meds probably. Everything seemed a little muffled, a little blurred. Even so, the pain was terrible, a sense of hollow weakness at the core of me. Nerve ends on fire as if my entire torso were one big rotten tooth. Sir Eravist's face, his sword. I groaned and closed my eyes. When I opened them, Rich had vanished again. I turned my head to look around me. The hospital room was small. Just the one bed, one bedside table, one armchair. There was a clear plastic bag hanging on a pole. The bag was full of fluid. A tube ran from the bottom of it into my arm. There was an electronic device on the bedside table next to me. It had red numbers on a readout, my vital signs. The device beeped steadily. It was night now. I could see the glare of streetlights through the slats of the Venetian blinds. It was weird, the way time kept passing. I looked in the other direction. There was a door leading out into the hallway. A man was sitting in a chair just outside. A man in uniform, a cop. Was he there to protect me, or to make sure I didn't escape? I was aware of falling asleep this time. I was aware I'd slept when I awoke. I felt Rich's weight on the mattress, and when I opened my eyes, sure enough, there he was again. Morning light was coming in through the blinds in sharp rays. I licked my crusted lips. "Water," I croaked. Rich glanced furtively toward the door, toward the cop in the hall. He took a plastic tumbler from the bedside table. It had a cap on with a built-in straw. He held the straw to my lips. I sipped the lukewarm water gratefully. "How long?" I managed to say then. He made a gesture with his hand, pressing down on the air. "Keep your voice down." "You've been here 3 days," he whispered. He leaned closer, whispered more softly. "Do you remember what I told you?" I shook my head no, I didn't. He sighed. "Damn it. All right, listen. You have to remember this time. They'll be coming back soon. They're going to question you." "Who?" "The police. But don't worry. We have lots of friends, plenty of friends high up. In the police department, the city, the state, everywhere. But they can't protect you if you don't say the right things." I looked at him dully. It was all true then. No dream. Orozco, my family, the book, another kingdom. There was so much I wanted to ask him. Did he know who Orozco was? Did he know the man was a mad monster? Did our parents know? Had they always known? Were they complicit in his madness? What had our family been up to all these years? "We're going to give them Sarah," Rich went on in low, secret tones. "Serge has agreed to it. It wasn't easy, let me tell you, but I convinced him. Sarah's crazy. Serge can't control the guy anymore. He has to get rid of him before he does something that drags us all down. All you have to say is that you went to visit Gunther about a book you were interested in. While you were there, Sarah came in. You'd never seen him before. Sarah and Gunther had a quarrel, like a lover's quarrel. Sarah was in love with him, but Gunther was only into women. Sarah shot him. Then Sarah put the gun to your head and told you he'd kill you if you went to the police. You were afraid, so you kept your mouth shut. But Sarah must have gotten worried you'd talk. He followed you to the Getty and stabbed you. Just tell it like that and you'll be all right. The important thing is, you never mention Serge. Never. He has nothing to do with this. Understand?" It took some effort, but I shook my head. I didn't care what Orozco did to me. I was done covering up for him. "What are you doing?" I whispered. The words ground against my throat like gravel. "You, Dad, Mom, with Orozco. The guy's a fucking lunatic." "Shut up," he hissed, leaning close, his lips red and glistening amidst the heavy beard. "Don't say his name. Don't ever say his name." He glanced over his shoulder toward the open door, toward the cop in the hall. Then he leaned down close to me again to whisper. "You don't understand anything. He's a great man. He's given so much of himself. He's going to transform the world in ways you can't even imagine." I only had enough strength to bring up one word. "Murder." "Duh." It was a noise of frustration. "Don't be a small man, Austin." I remembered. Those were Orozco's very words. Don't be a small man. "This is the future of the world we're talking about. A new age. Riley was bad enough, but at least she's crazy. You think he's going to let the likes of you get in the way of global transformation? Huh?" I blinked. Riley? What did my little sister have to do with anything? "If you don't care about yourself, think of her. Serge is my friend, but his patience won't last forever." I was gathering strength to ask him what the hell he was talking about when Rich suddenly stood up off the bed. The two detectives had come into the room. The detectives were named Graciano and Lord. Graciano was the short white guy all made up of rectangles. Lord was the big black woman with the bland face and the permanently suspicious expression. They stood at the foot of my bed. Graciano kept his hands in the pockets of his wrinkled khaki slacks. Lord scribbled in a notebook with a pen. Rich stood in the far corner of the room, impeccable in his three-piece suit. His blue eyes never left my face. "Okay, just once more to make sure we've got it right," Graciano said. "You went to see Gunther about a book." I nodded weakly. "And this man came in. You never saw him before." "Gunther called him Sarah," I said. They argued. This was Lord gesturing with her pen. "And just like that, the guy shoots Gunther dead right in front of you." "Yes." "And then threatens you," said Lord. "He said he'd kill me if I called the police. I was afraid." "But then the next day he shows up at the museum and stabs you anyway," said Graciano. I nodded again. "You're lucky we were right there," the detective went on. "The doctor said you'd have died if we hadn't been on the scene to stop the bleeding. Even so, she said it was a miracle." "She said it looked like you'd been run through with a sword," added Lord. "The chances a blade that size could go through you and miss anything vital. She said it was like it was guided through this narrow slot between your stomach and your liver, and then somehow missed your spine," said Lord. "A miracle," Graciano agreed. But no, I thought. It was the armor. Queen Alinda's magic armor. When it couldn't stop the blade, it guided it through. I licked my lips. "I don't remember," I said. The questioning was over very quickly, or at least it seemed quick to me, oddly quick. I'd expected to be grilled like a suspect on a TV cop show. You know, "Come on, Lively, don't insult our intelligence, we know you killed Gunther." I thought they'd go over my story again and again, searching for inconsistencies, challenging me, trying to catch me out. But there was none of that. Graciano and Lord had me tell the story once, then once again. Sometimes I wasn't sure whether I was telling it to them, or they were telling it to me and I was repeating it back to them. When we were done, they asked a few final questions. Then they turned and nodded to one another. "I guess we have what we need," Graciano said. "Looks that way," said Lord, though the wry, suspicious look remained on her face the whole time. It was only now that it occurred to me, drugged up and bleary-minded as I was, maybe these two detectives were some of the friends Rich had spoken about. Friends high up in the police department, the city, the state, everywhere. Maybe this whole interrogation was a setup, all arranged in advance. Graciano and Lord thanked me for my help. They gave me a business card and told me to call if I thought of anything else I wanted to tell them. Then they nodded a goodbye to Rich and left. The moment they were gone, Rich moved quickly to the door and shut it. He came back to my bed and stood over me. "Good job," he said. I looked away, sneering. I was angry. I didn't like lying. I didn't like covering up for Orozco. I didn't want to be part of any grand and murderous plans to change the world. I only said what Rich told me to say because I was afraid for my sister, and because I didn't know who to trust. "Well, get some rest," said Rich, and for the first time, I thought I heard something in his tone that might have been remorse, or at least embarrassment. I turned back to him. "What happens now?" I said hoarsely. He averted his eyes. "You don't have to worry about that. I'll take care of that." "Won't Sarah talk? If he knows he's taking the fall?" He shook his head. He still wouldn't look at me. "What's in the book, Rich?" I asked him. "Another kingdom. Why does Orozco want it so badly?" He made a vague gesture. That was his only answer. My wound was beginning to throb again. I needed some more meds, but I didn't want to get muzzy or lose consciousness. Not yet. I pressed on. "What's Riley got to do with any of this? Is she in danger? Look at me, you bastard. Is our kid sister in danger?" Rich gave me a quick and angry look. "She's my kid sister too," he snapped. "You think I haven't had to work to keep her alive this long?" "Keep her For Christ's sake, Rich, what have you done? What have you all done?" Rich hesitated. He looked like he was about to answer, like he wanted to answer. Finally, though, he just repeated, "Get some rest, bro." And he walked out of the room. The next day, my mother and father came down from Berkeley to visit. My mother sat in the chair by my bed. She wouldn't stop talking and couldn't stop fiddling with her phone. An endless stream of meaningless musing and gossip came out of her, and the whole time she was thumb-scrolling through her emails and her social media. My father, meanwhile, wandered around almost silently, examining the room as if there was something to find under the bed or behind the bureau. He'd answer my mother now and then with a grunt or a bit of muttered sarcasm, studying the wardrobe, looking out the window at the courtyard, rambling out into the hall and rambling back in again, and my mother talking all through. I lay on the bed and stared at them, like a dead man staring. All of this was typical of them, their typical behavior, and yet today they seemed awful to me. Sexless, lifeless, nearly inhuman. Had I always found them awful? Or was I just noticing it now for the first time? My mother, she was thin as a needle, flat as a blacked-out window, her body all lines, her face all angles, her lips sharp, her cheeks high, her eyes narrow. Her hair sprung out about her crown in brittle curls like steel wool. She was my mother. Shouldn't she have some soft place to burrow into? Just looking at my mother made me feel motherless. And my father, where was the manly meat and muscle on him? His body was like a willow wand. A breeze might have rippled it. His salt and pepper hair cut close to his head seemed solid as a helmet. Owlish, musing, preoccupied features. Sharp, narrow glasses. They both wore sharp, narrow glasses. They both had those vague, distant, distracted stares. As I looked at them, that same old moment came back to me. That same memory. Myself as a little boy, sitting in the back room of our house, creating tableaux with figures, space knights battling monsters amidst the stars. My mother and father in the living room, talking to my brother. I could hear their voices, their lockjaw tones of intellectual superiority. What were they talking about, I wondered now? Had I ever known? Had I known back then and since forgotten? Is that why I had escaped into the still delight of my figure stories? To forget? And what about Riley? My little sister, a mere toddler, crawling around in the storage spaces behind the wall panels. Could she hear their voices in there? Did she understand what they were saying? If we want a perfect country, good and nice and fair, we have to kill the Queen. I closed my eyes. That wasn't right. That wasn't my memory. That was Turritanio and Magdala in Shadow Wood describing the revolt in Galliana. Or was it all the same thing somehow? The pain meds made me feel confused. It's not that I don't feel for them, of course, my mother was saying, but it is an institution of learning after all. I had no idea what she was talking about. Her words pounded at me like a headache. Plus, I had a headache. "Does it really take 4 janitors to sweep a hallway?" she went on. "If you can save one entire administrative position by having a single person push a broom instead of... Well, really, I mean, it's all about the students, isn't it?" "Too bad there's no tenure for janitors," my father muttered, gazing out the window at who knew what. "Well, that isn't the point at all," my mother said. "That isn't what I'm talking about at all." And she went on to talk about whatever it was she was talking about. On and on and on. I opened my eyes and gave them my dead man stare again. My mother kept rambling. "At some point, these jobs are all going to be automated anyhow, and then we're going to have to..." "What is it you two do?" I asked. My voice was hoarse and weak. Maybe they didn't hear me at first, or maybe they just pretended they didn't hear me. My mother went on talking. Louder, I asked. "What is it you do for Sir Gerasco?" My mother stopped. She looked at me as if I'd said something grotesquely rude. My father glanced over his shoulder at me with an expression of bemused irony. "What is it Orozco does exactly?" I said, "and what part do you play in it?" "Well, there's no need to take that tone, sweetheart," my mother said, and that sweetheart of hers clinked like ice in a glass. "You work for him too, after all." "Yes, what is it you do?" my father said with a chuckle, as if he had hit on just the right response, as if he had scored a point against me. "The Orozco Age. What the hell does that mean?" I asked them. My voice sounded like a corpse's voice, even to me. "This perfect world you're going to make. Who has the power in it? Who makes all the decisions? How many people have to die to make it happen?" "Who said anything about dying?" my mother said, looking around as if she might find the culprit crouching in some corner of the room. "Don't criticize what you can't understand," murmured my father sing-song. He had wandered from the window to my IV bag now. He was studying it as if it were a work of modern art in a museum. "Yes, please, don't go all Riley on us, Austin," my mother said. Then, looking at her phone, she pointedly changed the subject, saying, "Oh, here's another hysterical email from Bert. It takes almost nothing to set him off these days. He sees Nazis under the bed." "Who can blame him nowadays?" my father murmured back. I stared from one to the other of them, my dead man's stare. "You haven't even asked who stabbed me," I said. That seemed to stop them both for a moment. My mother stopped talking. My father stopped wandering around, but only for a moment. "I'm sure the police will sort it all out," my mother said then, thumbing her phone. "Yes, the last thing the world needs," my father murmured, "is more paranoia." More paranoia. That night, after the aide cleared my dinner away, I called Riley. I got no answer, not even a voicemail recording. I sent her a text, then an email. No answer. Half an hour later, I called her again. I got no answer again. I turned off the light and lay in the dark, my gut throbbing. They'd given me a morphine machine for the pain. I could press the button for more meds whenever I needed to. I didn't press it. The meds made me groggy. I wanted my head clear. I wanted to think. I thought about Riley, my little black sheep sister, with her straw-colored pigtail braids framing her round baby face. "Don't go all Riley on us," my mother said. "Riley," my brother said, "was bad enough. You'd think I haven't had to work to keep her alive this long." I thought about lying next to her in her bed when she was little, her big blue eyes inches from my cheek, gazing at me like I was an island of love in her sea of loneliness. "Put Riley to bed, would you, darling?" my mother would say. And I would put Riley to bed, and Riley would say, "Tell me one of your stories, Oss." So I would lie down next to her and spin one out while she gazed at me like that, like I was an island of love. I phoned her again and texted her again. No answer. Well, it was only 15 minutes since I'd tried her before. The last thing the world needed was more paranoia. I thought of the last time I'd seen her on the video call, lying on her bed on her tummy, with her little girl's body, with her white stockinged feet kicking up behind her, and Marco, pimpy Marco with his vulpine smile sitting next to her, his hand on her ass, the bastard. My eyes filled. The meds, they were making me emotional. But also it was unbearable to think of her as she was when we were kids. "Tell me one of your stories, Oss," gazing at me from her lonely ocean inches away. To think of her then and to think of her as she was now, with some man always around to use her and abuse her, and her messed up, lost, empty video artist life. Had she known about Mom and Dad and Rich and Orozco? Had she listened to them from her hiding places behind the paneling? Is that what drove her crazy? Because she was crazy, there was no question about that. With her nutty conspiracy theories, aliens seeking to take over the world with the help of their international human cabal. I looked at the phone, still in my hands. It couldn't be about that, though, could it? I thought. Her conspiracy theories, her crazy videos, Ouroboros, dark dreams of reality. That couldn't be why Rich had had to talk Orozco out of killing her. Could it? She is getting too close to the truth, Marco had said. We are very close to exposing the whole conspiracy. I remembered how he had said that, and I remembered how he had lifted his hand off my sister's butt just long enough to point to the books on her shelves. The books with purple bindings and yellow lettering, books about UFOs and Templars and crystals and... I straightened up in bed. So quickly my gut seemed to shift within the hollow, wounded place in my belly. The scar there sent up a bright metallic flash of pain. I grimaced, my hand on the place where the sword had gone in. I thought, wasn't there another book on those shelves? A big, thick book right in the center? A book with a bright red binding and gold inlaid letters. The exact same binding as the book in Sean Gunther's cabinet. Another Kingdom. No, that's ridiculous, I thought. A false memory. But even as I thought that, I was bringing up videos on my phone. I searched for Riley's video series. I stared down at the phone, open-mouthed. There was nothing there. No videos. Not even a sign there had once been videos that had since been removed. The kooky chat rooms where people went to discuss the videos, those were gone too. Even the Wikipedia page about the videos was gone. It was all gone, all of Riley's work, as if it had never existed. The only thing that came up was the Wikipedia page for Ouroboros, the word Ouroboros. I clicked on it. An ancient symbol depicting a serpent or dragon eating its own tail, it said. I already knew that. Or I had known it at some point. But now that I saw it on the page, I remembered it. I remembered how, in her videos, Riley was always surrounded by that image. The circle that was formed by a snake eating its own tail. As I thought of it, it reminded me of something else too. But what? I searched my foggy brain. Then it came to me. The painting. Of course, the painting of wisdom in the Getty Museum. The one just above the painting in Gunther's snapshot of Ellen Evermore. The one I'd been looking at just before my last transition. There had been cherubs in the painting, little angels, putti. They fluttered around the seated wisdom figure. One held a mirror representing self-knowledge. One pointed at a book, his finger hovering over the word kingdom. And one held a snake coiled in a perfect circle, a symbol of eternity. Ouroboros. Riley? Is that what the clue meant? Was Ellen Evermore trying to tell me that she had passed the book on to Riley? Had she given the book to my sister to keep it safe from Orozco until I could track it down? With trembling fingers, I called Riley again. No answer. There was no answer the next day either. And no one came to visit me in the hospital. Not Rich, not my parents, not anyone. Though Jane Janeway sent me an animated Get Well e-card with Valentine hearts that rose on the page like bubbles. She had heard about the stabbing on the news, she said. She said she had tried to come see me, but the police wouldn't let her in. So for the time being, only the cop at the door kept me company. I knew now he was there to guard me, not arrest me. I knew that because Detective Lord and Detective Graciano had told the news media that I wasn't a suspect. They hadn't named me, and they hadn't revealed that I was the same man who had been stabbed at the Getty in an apparently random and unconnected incident. They just said they had interviewed the man and woman in the security photo taken at Gunther's gate, and they were no longer considered suspects. The reporters didn't ask much more about it. That was it. I'd been cleared and forgotten, just like that. Just as quickly as Riley's videos had vanished. How powerful was Orozco anyway? How high, how far, how wide did his influence reach?
This has been Another Kingdom by Andrew Klavan, performed by Michael Knowles.